let's bring in the man Kelly replaces, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, and President Trump's first transition director, former New Jersey Governor Christie, now an ABC News contributor. And Reince, let me begin with you. I want to put up a front page of the Washington Post this morning. Pure madness is the quote. Dark days inside the White House as Trump shocks and rages. Some of the other quotes in that piece from Trump allies: we haven't bottomed out yet. Morale is the worst it's ever been. So do you think John Kelly knew what he was getting into when he replaced you, and how does he fix things now?
Well, I think he did. And I also think that people understand that you can't look at the distractions. I think what the staff has to do is focus in on the results. And so I think what the president does, and he writes about it even in his own books, is he puts rivals around him intellectually. You have people like Wilbur Ross, who's going to be on your show, and Gary Cohn. And he puts those two guys in front of him and says, okay, fight out tariffs in front of me. And they fight it out. The media covers the fight, but ultimately the decision is made. And if you look at the president's decisions, which I always try to have people focus on, look at the economy, look at ISIS, look at the courts, the decisions and the things that President Trump has done have put him on a great course. If you're a Republican, you couldn't be happier. So the drama is there. But that is how the president makes decisions, and that process, while different, has gotten to good results. And that's what I think people need to do.
I guess the question, Christie, is the drama taking over everything else right now?
Well, unfortunately, from the beginning, and I've been saying this from the beginning, George, staff failures to the president have exacerbated this problem. The president's a unique political figure. The tweeting and the other things that he does make him unique, and it's part of what made him popular and made him able to win, and it also creates some downsides. But, you know, the Rob Porter situation was not a situation the president created, which has led to all of the other things we've seen this month. If the Rob Porter
classification is taken away.
Listen, the fact that that was not handled correctly from the beginning, the fact that you had all these people on interim clearances has created a lot of these problems. And so it's nice enough to say, well, you know, the president creates some drama and we have to look away from that. I agree with Reince on the issues of the courts and deregulation, the tax cut. But the problem is the president has been ill-served, in my view, by staff over the period of the last 15 months, where they create a lot of the distractions through their infighting, their leaking, and all the other things that we know have been going on here.
And the leaking has continued. But Reince, on that question, security clearances, of course, you were White House Chief of Staff for the first 6 months. We've now learned this week that not just Jared Kushner, but 30 White House officials, approximately 30 White House officials, losing their security clearance. How did this go on for so long, and how did it get by you?
Well, first of all, George, when the first crew comes in, it takes time to get the security clearances through. I was, by an example, I was the very first package to go through to the FBI and the DOJ. I got my temporary clearance at the end of December. I didn't get my permanent clearance until the end of April. I haven't missed a mortgage payment. I've had one wife for 19 years. These things take time. By the time I left, which was the end of July, it hadn't yet risen to the level that it has today.
But you knew there were problems
certainly
with
there were
Rob
some
Porter's
things that were popping up.
Right?
None at all. And as I understand it, there is some kind of agreement between the White House and the DOJ as to how and when staff is informed of particular issues that particular employees are being faced with. So that is something that by the time I left hadn't reached me from the White House security or the White House counsel's office. So, but look, I mean, obviously it was known at some point in January, and how it's handled is something that I agree with Chris on. How it's handled can reflect poorly on the president. I certainly am not happy at times when I was at the White House that things reflected poorly on the president. And certainly leaking against each other is something that's terrible, and it's distracting, and it's embarrassing. But certainly now, I think, you know, when you have leaking against the president, it's something that's fireable. And I think that he deserves, you know, better coverage for the things that he's getting done. And I just always try to focus people on the results as opposed to the distractions, because I do think he's doing a great job.
This is following most heavily now, Christie, on Jared Kushner. What a week he had. Loses his top secret clearance, series of stories about these meetings with the bankers, his vulnerability to foreign blackmail. At the end of the week, this report about 1 month after his father met with the finance minister of Qatar, was refused some financing, Jared Kushner organizing actions, diplomatic actions against Qatar. Does he have to go? Is he still well serving the president?
Well, listen, the president's going to have to make that judgment. And this is most particularly sensitive because it's a family member. And this is why
That's part of the problem.
Well,
isn't
of course. And I was going to say, George, that the situation is made much worse by the fact that when you have family members in the White House, it makes it much more difficult. And there were many of us who counseled the president, not just about Jared, but about any other members of his family having official positions, not because they weren't competent or qualified or that the president didn't trust them, but because when circumstances come up that the president couldn't have been aware of, and in a normal situation, you might terminate a staff member for that reason. It becomes a lot more difficult if you're going to be sitting at Thanksgiving dinner with that person. And so for Jared and for Ivanka and for all the other members of the family who were involved in one way or the other, I think everybody's got to focus on what's best for the president. When I was chairman of the transition, when I was endorsing him and working to try to get him elected, my focus all the time was what's the best thing for the candidate and then for the president-elect. And I think everybody on the staff here has got to get back to that. From General Kelly right on down, what's best for the president and the country. And I think, unfortunately, we've had because of all the infighting and all the leaking, they're ill-serving this president. And people talk about the drama he creates. I would suggest he only creates half the drama that goes on in the White House. And the other half is caused by staff who are killing each other. I've seen these stories attacking Kellyanne Conway from people inside there, who seems to be the only person who's been hanging in there with the president and putting his message out there. This is the kind of stuff that's just unacceptable.
How does Jared Kushner, Reince Priebus, even do his job right now? Supposed to be the point person on Middle East peace, the point person on relations with Mexico, yet he doesn't have access to top secret briefings.
Yeah, I'm not sure, George. I will say there's not a whole lot there. I disagree with what the governor said. It does make it more complicated with family, and so everything he said is true, but I do think that Jared and Ivanka over the course of the last 6 to 8 months have really found, I think, a sort of place for them that fits in nicely with their portfolio. I think initially it was a little bit more complicated because everyone kind of had access and there was a little bit less of lines of authority in place. But I think over time they've found a much better place. But there's no doubt about it. I mean,
George, let me say
it makes
this,
it a lot harder. It makes it a lot harder to get those things done.
Let me say this. That may in fact be true, that they've found a better place. But we're now talking about things that happened a year and a half ago. And this is the problem.
Right.
You know, it's not what's been happening in the last few months. I think Ivanka did a fabulous job on the child care tax credit as part of the tax reform discussions. But that's not the point. The point is now we're talking about stuff that happened 14, 15, 16, 18 months ago. This happens all the time in administrations, and you know that. But what makes it more complicated is it involves family. And I feel badly for the president in this regard, because now you're sitting across from a family member, from a son-in-law, from a daughter, and have to have hard political conversations with them, which are never easy.
And it sounds like from our reporting that at this point, at least he's telling some people he wishes Jared would find a way to leave.
And listen, I think, again, that's why I emphasized this morning, George, that I think what the staff has to do is, in fact, what Hope Hicks, I think, did. I think Hope Hicks saw that between the Rob Porter situation and some of the other things that were going on, that she was becoming a distraction for the president and less of an asset in her mind. And she did the noble thing, in my view, which was to say, you know what, if I'm not 100% an asset for the president, I'm gonna back away. And I think she deserves credit, and I don't think she's getting a lot of it in this kind of scandal-driven stuff that's going on, but she deserves credit, I think, for saying, you know what, this is about the president and the country.
Reince Priebus, one person who's not going anywhere, it appears, is the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Extraordinary back and forth with the president this week, followed up by that dinner he had with his top two deputies at the Justice Department. You've been involved in the middle of this since last year as White House Chief of Staff, and I want to look at an excerpt from The Gatekeepers where it was discussed how you tried to keep Jeff Sessions from resigning. He said the president told you, don't try to slow me down like you always do. Get the resignation of Jeff Sessions. Once again, Priebus stalled Trump, according to White House insider. He told the president, if I get this resignation, you are in for a spiral of calamity that makes Comey look like a picnic. So what happens now? You stopped in once before. What would happen? What would it mean if Jeff Sessions left right now?
Well, I agree with that interpretation. I think it is a problem, and I don't think that it would be good for the president for Attorney General Sessions to leave. But I also think the president has made up his mind in regard to how he feels about the recusal. He feels like that was the first sin, the original sin. And he feels slighted by it. He doesn't like it, and he's not going to let it go. And so I think when he feels frustrated about the Russia probe and all of those things that he watches on television or he reads about in the paper, he feels slighted by it, and he's not going to let it go. He's a person who doesn't really pull a punch, and he said that as much when he was campaigning. He told the American people what they were going to get. He doesn't pull a punch. And you know what? For better or worse, that's what you have.
But that is the question right now.
Again, I go back to the results. I go back to the results.
Let me just stop you there, because I want to bring this to...
That is what the American people knew, and they voted for him, and he's doing a great job.
Let me bring this, though, to Governor Christie. He just said for better or worse. You've got this, again, we've never seen anything like this between a president and an attorney general in public. We also now know that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is looking at these actions as part of an obstruction of justice case.
Well, listen, a few things. I would say you're right that the public nature of it is a bit different, but you know that in the past there have been really frosty relations and
but
animosity.
Keep it private.
Right, but then it leaks out, George. How do you and I know about it? We know about it, whether it was between Janet Reno and President Clinton, whether it was between President Nixon and some of his attorneys general, some of which became public, some of which didn't. These things go on.
Causing a heap of trouble.
Of course. And in the end, I think what we have to look at in this piece of it is the work of the Justice Department going? Is it still happening? And I think you see with Robert Mueller's investigation, it's proceeding apace. I mean, he's working hard and he's producing a lot of results. I think you see Chris Wray making real difference at the FBI and seemingly unmoved by any of this stuff. I mean, I could tell you, I look at the way Chris Wray conducts himself from day to day in this job with all the tumult that's going on. Chris Wray doesn't even look like he's affected by any of it. And I think that's the kind of leadership that we need to make sure that
so you would counsel Jeff Sessions to stay?
Listen, I would counsel Jeff Sessions to do what he said he was going to do a while ago, which was he was going to stay as long as he thought he was serving the president, the Justice Department, and the country in the best way that it could be served. But I also will say, as a former chief executive, the president has the right to do what he wants to do. And if the president has absolutely no confidence in the attorney general, then the president has to act, not just criticize, but act. And he has the right to do that. And as a former chief executive, I wouldn't deprive him of that right. But in terms of Jeff Sessions' own decision, he's got to decide, am I being effective? And am I serving the country well? And am I serving the people of the Department of Justice well? Because it matters.
Chris Christie, Reince Priebus, thanks very much. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.